This podcast is sponsored by St. Francis Regional Medical Center. St. Francis Southbridge Urgent Care is open during convenient daytime, evening, and weekend hours. Friendly providers can treat you on a walk-in basis, and Southbridge Urgent Care also offers free online check-in, so you can wait for your appointment in the comfort of your own home. Southbridge Urgent Care is conveniently located in Shakopee across from Sam's Club. Visit stfrancis-shakopee.com/urgent care for details. Hi, and welcome to the Shakopee Chamber Podcast. My name is Angie Whitcomb, and I am proud to be the president and CEO of the Shakopee Chamber and Visitors Bureau, and even more proud to welcome you to our little episode today. We started this podcast back in June as a way of connecting with our membership and the surrounding community when gathering was not encouraged. And well, look outside, we're still there. So we will continue to bring you this show. We're getting good feedback, and it's a lot easier to book a speaker for a 30-minute phone interview than it sometimes is to get them to come down and see us in person. So it's working, and we'll continue to move forward with that. We want to thank our sponsors for making this happen. St. Francis Regional Medical Center has been very generous to us as we've kicked this off. And next week, you will hear from a new sponsor. So we offer this sponsorship quarterly. And if you are interested, let me know, and we'll look at it in 2021. We're talking about something today that up until 2 weeks ago, I didn't really know a lot about. And the more I heard, I realized I need to, because I feel like it affects my consumer choice, but I also feel like it has a pretty significant business impact. So our guest today is Amber Backhaus with the Minnesota Auto Dealers Association. And I want to take a minute to welcome you, Amber. Thanks for joining us.
Yeah, thank you, Angie. I really appreciate the opportunity to be here with you today and reach all your listeners of this podcast.
Yeah, well, there's millions of them, I'm sure.
That's what I've heard.
Eventually there will be. So before we dive into this hot topic that has me, the more I find out about it, the more questions I have. Before we dive into that, let's give our viewers a little bit of a background of, tell me about the Minnesota Auto Dealers. How many members? Tell us about your organization.
I know, I'd be happy to. So I'm with the Minnesota Automobile Dealers Association, and we represent the over 350 franchise new car and truck dealers across the state of Minnesota. Our members are predominantly multi-generation family-owned local businesses that have been serving their communities for decades, and it's a real pleasure to represent them at the Capitol. And they employ about 20,000 Minnesotans, which is a significant number across the state. It is a lot of jobs, and good paying jobs with lots of opportunities for vertical advancement in the dealership community.
Yeah.
So great jobs to raise and support a family on. And they also generate a ton of money for our state's transportation infrastructure by all the motor vehicle sales tax that's generated from the cars they sell. So doing a lot for our communities, and here to serve the people of Minnesota.
Yeah, well, this podcast is, we didn't start it to talk about COVID, but that seems to be what weaves in. So I would hate to, skip an episode and not talk about it. So real quickly, how have the auto dealers been affected by COVID? How has that industry been hit?
Yeah, well, fortunately, both the federal government and the state government recognize dealerships as essential businesses because people still had to get around. Doctors and nurses still had to get to their jobs and that sort of thing. So we were able to keep providing repairs during the lockdown. We were able to take services by appointment, and that's still going on for sales. So that's been helpful. But there was a significant hit to sales those months of March and April. They were down anywhere from 20 to 60%, depends on who you talk to. Things have started to bounce back, but there's still some lingering concerns about what the long-term impact on the economy is going to be.
Yeah, well, in every industry, and very few are immune.
Right.
So, all right, let's get into this topic, because you introduced this to myself and a room full of, about 85. I think we ended up having, between virtual and in-person, chamber execs from across the state. You brought this to our attention, and I know, talking after the conference that day, we were all like, I had no idea this was happening. So what we're talking about is the Walz administration has indicated that the governor plans to implement the California car regulation here in Minnesota. And so what I understand, and correct me if I'm wrong, is he wants to regulate the amount of electric vehicles that dealers must keep on their lots. So mandated. And the idea is to increase the supply of electric vehicles on the road to reduce carbon emissions, which some of that sounds great, but the mandate part and following another state's lead versus our own. So take it from there. What am I right? Am I understanding it correctly?
You are understanding it correctly, but unfortunately, most of the public doesn't know about it. And the way it's been branded is somewhat deceiving. So about a year ago, when Governor Walz announced this initiative, he called it Clean Cars Minnesota. And he said that Minnesota would be pursuing initiatives to clean up the air and help reduce the amount of emissions that are coming from motor vehicles, because that's a significant sector in terms of the impacts on climate change. And so that all sounds good and fine, but when you dig into the details, it's not Minnesota coming up with its sort of homegrown own initiative to deal with climate change and reduce initiatives. It is adopting California's rules, and you're absolutely correct. California has a program that dictates the amount of electric vehicles that need to be offered for sale in the state. So it would be a mandate on the dealers. The other part of the rule is that all vehicles as well, even non-electric, zero emission vehicles, would have to be certified by the state of California to be able to be sold here.
So a car, if I didn't want to buy an electric car and I wanted to buy the newer version of what I'm driving now, which I love, it would need to be certified by someone in California before I could buy it here?
Correct. So the only vehicles offered for sale would be California certification standards for emissions. And so it deals with fuel economy and emissions with regard to particulate matter and that sort of thing.
Okay. So I can see where this mandate would increase the supply of electric vehicles. And I've got a couple of questions around that. Are we in short supply of electric vehicles in the state and the ability to purchase them in our state? Is this a problem we're trying to solve? Or is it really about the cleaner air? Because I don't see anything about the demand side in this. I mean, if I walk into a dealership and it's all electric cars, but that's not my thing, I'm not buying one.
Right. Yeah, no, it's interesting. The proponents claim that there's people just clamoring for electric vehicles and there's not enough supply here. But if you look at our annual sales data, we're only selling maybe 1.5% electric vehicles per year in the state of Minnesota. And so just putting more a supply mandate on the dealers, I don't think is going to change anything if consumers aren't interested. So that is going to be a struggle for us here.
Because I'm thinking if I'm a dealer and people are coming in and saying, oh, I'd buy that car, but I'm really looking for an electric, I would get more on my short floor. If I'm selling anything and I don't have what my customers are telling me they want, I'm going to go get what my customers are telling me. I'm going to pivot. Because I want to look at this from both sides. I don't want to be just,
right.
And like I said, this is where the more I learn, the more questions I have. But to me, being a businesswoman, it feels like a simple supply and demand. And I think that I'd like to hope we've got smart elected officials in St. Paul that could figure that out.
Right.
Am I right?
No, exactly. But that's part of the issue as well. So this isn't a decision that the legislature is going to be making and voting on to move forward with. The Walz administration is doing it via rulemaking. So they have charged the Pollution Control Agency with moving forward with this, and it doesn't take a majority vote of the legislature to sign off on this. So, we're missing that voice from folks across the state. But you're right.
If they can't do their job on something this big, why are they there?
And this is a new precedent, really, to have such a major policy initiative not be approved by the legislature. Because typically with rulemakings, the legislature approves a policy and then maybe the agencies do a rulemaking to figure out the nuts and bolts and the details to get the program to work. It's not wholesaling adopting of a big new policy initiative through the executive branch.
Interesting. Okay. So California's got this policy and, understanding what limited I do about California, it probably makes sense for their state. Should each state have their own ability? Why are we following California? Why is that the gold standard that we seem to be going with?
Sure. Well, under the Clean Air Act, the Federal Clean Air Act, that sets a national standard, and that was adopted in 1970. But because California has a legacy of bad air and had their own regulations before then, when the Clean Air Act was passed, California's regulations were grandfathered in. So the Clean Air Act says there's the federal standard, and then California can have its own because its air is a mess out there. So they've always had their ability to do their own thing. Now, the Federal Clean Air Act says, well, some states could choose to follow California if they don't want to follow the federal standard. But you're supposed to have bad air in your own state if you're going to do that. It's other states that can't meet federal air standards that could follow the California model.
Yeah.
But we in Minnesota don't have bad air. We don't have areas of non-attainment that can't meet the federal threshold. So it's kind of crazy that we're going to follow California, which is writing rules to deal with its really significantly bad air, 148 areas of non-attainment, and we have 0 in our state.
Yeah. So, again, more questions than not. Like you were going through so many things. So, okay. So let's just take a look at that. So we don't have bad air. So you talk about the federal the federal standards.
Yes.
When President Trump took office, he rolled those back. Are they at a level right now where it is harming Minnesotans? Because I mean, I live here, I've got kids, you live here, you've got kids. I don't want bad air. I don't want to be, we work really hard in our house to contribute as small of a footprint as we possibly can. And who knows, maybe down the road, I'll be driving a Tesla, but I work for a chamber. I can't afford a Tesla. So telling me I have to go buy one probably isn't going to matter. But I mean, are our federal, what is the word? Is the federal standard so poor at having been rolled back that this is a concern where we would just jump on the California bandwagon in what feels like kind of a knee-jerk panic move?
No, it's not. And I people call it a rollback, but there is no change to what comes out of your tailpipe and those standards in terms of what the federal government has done. But the federal government and the Trump administration has slowed down the improvements in fuel efficiency that were approved during the Obama administration.
Okay.
So going forward, it was supposed to be a 5% reduction in emissions each year. The Trump administration slowed that down. So it's only a 1.5% reduction in emissions each year. California is sticking with that 5%. So,
well, as somebody who enjoys a quality of life, I like 5% better than 1.5%.
Right.
What does that mean for me as a consumer though? If we just went to as a state said, we're going to have a 5% decrease, but without going all the way and you're going to drive an electric car and you're only going to sell electric cars. I mean, is that attainable? Is that an option? I mean, I feel like there's a lot of gray area between where we are today and this.
Definitely. And I think, we all want to see cleaner air, but there also has to be that balance between getting there and what's technologically feasible and cost effective in the meantime. And so my understanding is part of the reason that the Trump administration slowed down those improvements is because manufacturers weren't able to meet those requirements. They weren't going to be able to produce the vehicles to get to that level of reduction. So I think they looked at 1.5% being a good compromise where you're still making improvements in air quality, but it's something that can be done technologically and at less cost to consumers.
Well, and that's, especially given the world we're in now, I mean, people have been furloughed and laid off and lost jobs. And I know that unemployment number is going in the right direction, but this has not been a financially easy year for anyone. And the next several are going to be recovery mode. So what is the timeline on this, Amber?
Right. No, exactly. So the Pollution Control Agency is saying that they are going to publish notice of their intent to adopt the California standard later this fall. And then
now we're in fall, like now.
Yes, the late fall. So whatever that means. I mean, I guess we're still early. So, but
it's a short season.
It is a short season. Blink and you miss it in Minnesota. But so anytime in the coming weeks. Then through the rulemaking process, they'll publish notice, there'll be time for public comment, there'll be some back and forth there, but it would be probably within 6 months of that publishing notice of the rule that they'd adopt it. Now, the Federal Clean Air Act does require 2 years before it could become effective in terms of some lead time for the manufacturers to make sure they have the vehicles to meet the standard. But that would put us at maybe like model year 2024, 2025. And that's the same time that the California rule ratchets up what's required of the manufacturers.
So if we adopt this, are we then, upon execution of this in Minnesota, are we then obligated to ratchet up too? I mean, so we're going from 0 to a new ratcheted level?
Exactly.
And what does that mean for the economy here? I mean, I'm thinking about these auto dealers, and I feel like everything's going to be 100% more expensive. And as a consumer, that concerns me. I'm probably going to drive my car till it's one of those stinky ones on the freeway, making everything smell and things falling off it. I mean, it feels.
I think the timing is just horrific with everything everybody's going through right now. So even the Pollution Control Agency, they agree that all vehicles are going to be more expensive once this comes into effect. They're looking at a cost of $800 more per vehicle, but it could be as much as $2,000, $2,500 more. And we know people will drive 100 miles to save $50 on a car. I mean, that upfront cost is the number one factor that influences a consumer's decision. So higher prices are just going to be tough for Minnesotans.
Oh, for sure. Well, and you can buy a car online now. I mean, COVID has changed the way car buying even happens. And, I can shop from home and they'll bring it to me and sanitize it on their way out. I mean, oh my gosh. Okay. So thinking about Minnesota.
Yes.
It snows here like 14 months out of the year. And we need vehicles with, big wheels and all-wheel drive. And, I have a kid and a dog and we haul stuff. I work at a chamber. Thank God Tim on our team has a truck. I mean, we're a truck state. Hockey tournaments. I mean, think of all the Suburbans and Escalades and whatever that are driving kids. I mean, we're a truck state. I'm guessing very few of the vehicles we use here in Minnesota are going to pass those standards, especially as they ratchet them up. And again, we go back to how is the consumer going to adjust to this?
No, exactly. Minnesotans buy more trucks than any other state. And when I say trucks, I mean your pickup trucks, your SUVs, your crossover. I mean, every year the Chevy Silverado and the Ford F-150 duke it out for the number one vehicle that's sold in the state. So we like our big trucks. And to your point, we need them to drive on those tough roads in the winter for four-wheel drive, hurdle those snowbanks, but as well as, haul kids to sporting events or get your boat to the cabin, all that kind of stuff. So very different than California. California sells maybe 50%, 54% trucks a year. We sell over 82%.
Wow.
So, we're proposing a regulation that's based on a state that has a totally different model in terms of what consumers like to drive and what's available.
So I go back to my original question. Why do we have to copy California? I've cast my vote assuming somebody is going to think like a Minnesotan while they're in St. Paul and create rules and laws. And I hate the word mandate. I hate I'm not a big fan of them anyway, but with us in mind, why take the shortcut of copying California? Why couldn't we just come up with our own and have it at 5% if that's what we want, but not have all of this punitive in a year that feels like everything is punitive, right? Like everything is, you can't, we won't let you, we're acting in your best behavior. And I get around COVID, some of that, that's probably a bad analogy, given that some of that makes sense in that instance, as we're talking about a global pandemic and stopping the spread and saving our systems. But this isn't what we're talking about. This feels very because I said so. And I want them to create something for us. Am I wrong?
Right. No, you're not at all. And we have pushed back and said, why are we not only doing a mandate, but another state's mandate? We think there are ways to get consumers to think about electric vehicles that aren't so punitive. And states that have seen success in getting more people behind the wheel of an EV offer incentives. They have a more robust charging infrastructure. They do a lot more education of consumers. I mean, there are things we could do that would be our own Minnesota approach to this that I think would move the needle farther than what's been proposed.
Well, and would feel better. I mean, you bring up a good point. Don't tell me I have to buy it, or don't tell the dealers that's what they have to sell. Offer a tax credit for it. I mean, we do it for all of the other energy stuff. Why not this? I mean, if I want to put solar panels on my house, I would get a tax credit.
Right.
If I go through, Xcel Energy's process and change everything to LED and all, I get a tax credit. Incentivize people. I mean, it's like raising your kid. If I tell Grace to do something versus, make it her idea or ask her if she'd want to, it's a very different outcome. right?
Exactly. No, I know. Got a 13-year-old son. I get it. Yeah.
Yeah. Right. And not that, you know, not that we're just going to say no to this because we don't like being told what to do. I think Minnesotans want to do the right thing. That's who we are. We want clean air. We live here. I mean, Prince said it best. Why do you live in the cold? Keeps the riffraff out. We like it here. We like our clean air, right? So, I mean, I think we want to do the right thing, but I don't know that this doesn't feel like it's it. It doesn't feel like it's been thought through. Do you know what the process has been to lead up to this is the way we're going and we're going to make it a rule versus a legislative discussion? Do you have the history on that?
Um, I have my theories. I think part of it is because there are some other states that follow California. Folks in the administration thought, well, other states are doing it, so it should be fine here.
How many states are following them, and what is it meant for their economy? I mean, that's
sure. So there are approximately 13 other states that follow California's lead. But at first, I want to say all of those states have had areas of bad air quality where they don't meet federal standards. So they've looked to California to try to, use that model to clean up their bad air. And then I think, many of them have been on the books since the late 90s, early 2000s. And it's worked there because the threshold of electric vehicles that have to be offered for sale is very low, and they've been able to trade credits. But in a couple of years, that's all going to go away. As I said, it's going to be a higher threshold of EVs. The credits aren't going to be as accessible. So it takes away the tools that have made it work. The other thing I'd want to add is states that have just done the mandate alone really aren't seeing more sales. Like the state of Maine follows California, but they sell actually less electric vehicles than we do a year. The states that have followed California that have success also have incentives, and even California provides significant incentives. They have paid, I think it's $600 million over the last 7 years to fund a consumer rebate program. And that's gotten their sales up to 8%. And we have 8? None of that, and only 8.
Only 8. I mean, that's not an incredible number. And I can't imagine that that's having a significant impact on the air quality.
Yeah.
Interesting. Okay. So if this gets pushed through as a rule, how does the business community make their opinion known? How do we as consumers make their opinion known? That, and again, it's in my head, Amber, and it's, 120 years of my life have been in business, it feels like, and that's just since March. But this just feels like a simple supply and demand, economics 101, supply and demand. I still can't reconcile how this is going to solve for that. I feel like we're solving a problem with a different answer, a problem that maybe doesn't exist with the answer for a different question. So
yes,
how do we
completely.
make our voice heard?
None of it makes any sense. Yeah, no. So once the notice is published by the PCA, that the Pollution Control Agency, that they're going to move forward with this, there will be a period for public comment. But we know that's hard for people to show up in an agency and weigh in or write a letter. So we have tried to make it very easy. We have a website, www.savemntrucks.com, where folks can learn more about this, but they can also sign a petition to say that they're opposed to this idea, and their names will be part of that record so that the agency will know that Minnesotans are listening and that there are folks that don't think this is the way to go.
Well, and even, I don't want it to come across as, we're all pro global warming. Like, I want to save this planet. I want to do my part. Like I said, here in our house, in at the office, we do everything we can. But I feel like this deserves a discussion. This deserves a close examination of the unintended consequences. I mean, we're already losing bars and restaurants. They're not coming back. In Shakopee, we've lost retail. Who knows if they'll come back? Not those, maybe new ones might, but that, there's a lot of what ifs in the next couple of years as we, manage this road of recovery, praying that we don't go so far down into a recession or worse yet, that it's not a recovery for a while. I just feel like we're going to lose auto dealers. I mean, if cars are too expensive, that people stop buying them as often as they do, or I just feel like there's a lot of unintended consequences and a lot of discussions that need to be had as a collective we, right? I mean, isn't that like, we are one Minnesota? Let's have a discussion then about this. It just feels like that. I don't know. I mean, I think about the auto dealers in Shakopee, and I can't imagine not having them there. And maybe
Yeah.
that's not going to be one of the consequences right away. But, you think about, Governor Newsom saying that by 2035, that state's not going to be allowed to sell anything that's gas powered. I mean, now are we talking about my John Deere lawnmower and my, blower for the leaves? I mean, and are we going to have to follow that? Can you imagine getting through a Minnesota winter? I mean, and maybe the car manufacturers, I mean, I don't want to rule this out. Maybe they'll get to that point. I mean, I know I was talking to one of my teammates talking about how Ford's going to have a hybrid and then pretty soon they'll have an all electric, but that takes time and R&D and all of this. Give us a minute to get there, I feel like. Am I
Oh, no, you're completely right. I mean, the manufacturers are making significant investments, like hundreds of millions of dollars into electric vehicle technology, but they're still not quite performing at what Minnesotans would expect in terms of getting the range you want and the mileage you want, in terms of being able to keep a charge in your battery, in terms of the time to charge your battery. People like going to the gas station, fill up in 10 minutes or less. I mean, right now, this technology can take anywhere from 30 minutes to a whole day to get to a full charge. So,
well, and
I
in
think those
30
kind of
below
things.
weather, I mean, how fast does that charge drain? I don't want to be.
You don't want to have the choice of having your heat on or getting to your destination, which is often the case.
I mean, that was my college car. I've moved on from that, Amber. Don't turn on the heat, open the vent. Yeah, we don't need that again. I'm not going back, Amber.
No.
Okay. So this is going to be not a legislative discussion. What are legislators saying? I can't imagine they've got their head in the sand and don't know anything about this. What are they saying? And is there any hope for delaying this rule? I mean, because let's face it. Okay, no, there's a public comment period, but not enough people pay attention to that. So I feel like there needs to be a groundswell of, you got to read this news article, or you have to go to this website. You have to understand what's about to happen and how it will impact you as a consumer. And that's the whole thing I keep going back to here. Yes, obviously we're the chamber and we're pro-business, and I worry about the dealers and them having a say in how they run their business. But as a consumer, I don't want my rights and my choices taken away. So are there legislators who I've voted for or didn't vote for, but now support because they're in that office, who are saying, wait a minute, my voters might have something to say about this? Is anybody standing up saying, hold on?
No, definitely. There were efforts during the past legislative session to take away the PCA's authority to do this, and that passed the Minnesota Senate. There was a vote in the Minnesota House, and it didn't pass there, but it was a bipartisan vote that tried to stop this from moving forward. And it was pretty darn close. I would say that there are definitely legislators that think this is the wrong approach. Unfortunately, there are not enough of them right now in the Minnesota House to put the brakes on this.
Yeah. So if it goes through, do we have any way to, elections have consequences. Maybe someday we will be with a whole new set of people in St. Paul.
Yes.
Can we roll back on this? Can we peel away? I mean, or is this like a tattoo and it's there forever?
No, if there is the legislative will, that would trump the rulemaking process. So
even if it passes first, even if it goes into
effect, yes. Otherwise, then there's always the chance that you'd have a different governor who wouldn't move forward, want to keep moving forward with this. But again, they'd have to propose a rulemaking to undo it, which just takes time.
It's all so much. Yeah. So what are your auto dealers saying about this? What are your members saying about this?
They're really concerned about it and nervous about it. The financial implications in terms of higher priced vehicles, deterring customers, in terms of having to buy electric vehicle inventory and finance it and not have anybody to sell it to that's interested. So there's a lot of costs and a lot of uncertainty that just really keep them up at night.
Well, and you haven't even touched on the servicing of the vehicles. I mean, I got to imagine it's a whole different protocol. right?
Yes, it is different. And there's a lot of additional costs that the dealers incur in terms of being able to service the vehicles and make the investments in the tools and the charging infrastructure and all those sorts of things. And as we said before, there are some dealers that have a big base of customers that want EVs. So it's made sense for them to make that investment. Yeah. But, for some of the dealers, maybe up in War Road or Thief River Falls, that's not what their customers are wanting to buy. So they don't want to have to make those investments right now.
Yeah. And this isn't a situation of dealers not being able to get the inventory if their customers are asking for it, right? That's not what we're talking about.
No, correct. I mean, a dealer will track down that vehicle that you want and get it for you. That already happens now. If you don't have the right trim and color on your lot, you look elsewhere and dealer trade from somewhere else to get it for that customer.
Yeah. I put the guys at Shakopee Chev through an ordeal every time my lease is up. I'm like, but I want this color seat or this stereo speaker. And they've gone to the end of the earth to find me, and it's all, none of it has anything to do with how the car actually functions.
Right. But consumers have definite preferences of what they want. And that's what our dealers want to do is to deliver for them. So.
Yeah. Well, and that's what every retailer, every customer facing business wants to do. And we're just making it really hard this year. We're not. Sure. COVID has made it really hard this year and everything else, right? Yes. Well, Amber, I applaud you for the work you're doing. I know the importance of advocating for your members. We do it at the Shakopee Chamber, and I appreciate all the work that you're doing on behalf of, I know, 2 of my members who, thank you. And we will put some information on our website on, so people can learn more about this. And if you could send me, who they need to contact. I mean, maybe they're for it. Make that known too. But,
sure.
Legislators need to hear from us. The governor needs to hear from us. And this keeps going back to consumer choice and supply and demand for me. And I guess I'll just have to work on continuing to reconcile that. But thank you for all you're doing.
You're not the only one.
Well, and thank you for bringing this, shedding some light on this. Like I said, until I saw you 2 weeks ago, I had no idea this was happening, and shame on me. But in all fairness, that last legislative session was a little bit overshadowed by all things COVID. So honestly, I don't know what else went on besides how do we keep our businesses open? And, everybody was in triage
survival mode.
Yeah. And our focus was our members and making sure they had what they needed. And so I applaud you for doing that for your members. And I thank you for sharing some of your time with us today and enlightening us and keep sending me information, and I'll keep getting it out to our members. People, I say it, we're in election season and we're doing a lot with the candidate debates and candidate interviews. And I say, every Minnesotan deserves an informed candidate, educated and informed candidate, but educated and informed voters are who influence elections, who change elections. So we will stand by our commitment to educate and inform voters and taxpayers so they can respond accordingly. Right. So thanks for your time today. And thanks everybody for tuning into this episode of, I almost said meet the candidates, because we're all things. All things election, but the Shakopee Chamber Podcast. You can find us on all of the podcast channels, as well as our Facebook page, the Shakopee Chamber website, and YouTube. Until we see you next week, everybody stay well. This podcast is sponsored by St. Francis Regional Medical Center. St. Francis Southbridge Urgent Care is open during convenient daytime, evening, and weekend hours. Friendly providers can treat you on a walk-in basis, and Southbridge Urgent Care also offers free online check-in, so you can wait for your appointment in the comfort of your own home. Southbridge Urgent Care is conveniently located in Shakopee across from Sam's Club. Visit stfrancis-shakopee.com/urgent care for details.